Hey everybody, I'm Jason Nazar and welcome to another in our edition of If I Knew Then Leadership Lessons in combination with Entrepreneur.com and Comparably. Very happy to have Larry Gadea from Envoy. Hey Larry, how you doing?
Hey, Jason, nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to spend some more time with you. And this series was put together largely so that we could have transparent and honest and vulnerable conversations with amazing leaders like Larry, and especially for what he and his business has been going through for COVID and how he's incredibly led that company through it and the success that he's had. I think it's going to be an amazing time that we all spend together. So for those of you joining us for the first time, thank you. For those so many of you that have come back to watch this series a dozen plus times. So excited to have you back again. I'm Jason Nazar. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Comparably. We are a employee review platform. We help companies with their employer brand and help make company cultures more transparent. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I sold my last company into it. I'm a pretty active angel investor and board member of tech companies, especially here in Southern California. And when I look at folks that I learn a lot from and that have just had amazing journeys, Larry, you're very high up on that list. And so between your background as a software engineer that was highly recruited out of high school to how you navigated those waters to become a CEO and how now you're navigating a business that squarely, has to deal with the implications of COVID, I've just really been looking forward to this conversation. And so maybe to start off, it'd be great if you could just let everybody know more about Envoy and what your business does.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Envoy is a workplace technology company that's modernizing the day-to-day of workplaces around the world. We basically create these products for great visitor experiences. That's how a lot of people know us. But the packages that come into an office, the conference room booking, there's all sorts of things around hot desking that we're now doing it with. And it's all around unifying everything in the workplace under this one workplace platform. We're kind of like this OS for the workplace where it links together all the different moving parts. And especially now during COVID, where there's all this health and safety, it's just so critical. So we recently just did a whole bunch of things that we pivoted our products and switched everything over. It's all about health and safety assessments, capacity management, resource sharing of desks and meeting rooms, and then just ensuring adequate space between people. So yeah, it's just making companies really feel confident about their returns to the workplace, and especially with safety being such a priority amongst everyone. Everyone must have everyone needs to have a great experience, including the employees in all of this, because it's not going to be safe unless everyone in the workplace participates. And since we've been about experience and usability the whole time since the beginning of our company, we feel very confident and we've seen some very, very promising early results.
Yeah. And, so many of us have had to pivot and evolve because of COVID. We're certainly a business that was affected by it. And, you're right in the center of that storm. And so we'll talk more about this later, but just kind of wanted to get a sense of how you've been feeling over the last year. I mean, you took on a fair amount of capital, right? You've raised, almost $60 million. You were one of the hottest companies in Silicon Valley. You had this amazing pedigree at Google and Twitter. So I know in part what it's like to feel like you got these big expectations on your shoulder. And then here comes COVID and your entire business model gets just, tossed up. Before we go into the details of it, what was that experience like for you? Like, how are you feeling about it? And how do you felt like you dealt with it over the last year?
Yeah, it's wild, right? Like just imagine the concept where you've built this business for the last several years, and we've been like 7-something years that we were building this, and then suddenly COVID comes, and surprise, your core business is now just fully impacted. People literally cannot use your products because the government has, or just regulation and best practice has literally said no more workplaces, and you must all be at home. So that was pretty scary at first. That's for sure. I'm absolutely going to admit to that. But honestly, what it's done is it's made us all really just think really strongly about, okay, what can we do to help here, and how can we really kind of be building for this? It's an opportunity like none other where we can be more relevant in terms of helping people safety and all these different things. And that's been what's been just making me and the whole company and team really excited and how we keep executing on different things. So yeah, it was wild at first and it still is, but these days it's just normal for us now to be building new products We've never innovated faster. We've never built faster. And that's a really exciting kind of muscle for us to really, really build now. As this is really what we wanted to always get into, just building for the entire workplace. So yeah, very, it's had ups and downs, but it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll talk about this more later on too, but I just wanted to try to dive into this for a moment. I really want to just get your take on how you see the future of work of physical offices over the next 5 to 10 years. And I'll use ourselves as an example. So this is a fourth company I've started, and I was always someone that was very much in the camp of having people together in one physical location. So I had never built virtual offices and teams. I was always really pretty adamant against hiring people outside of Los Angeles. Even if someone was just 50 minutes away, I thought, hey, this is going to put too much of a strain, because I felt like the magic happened all being physically together. And COVID has really dramatically shifted my perspective. And coming out of COVID, we will be a hybrid office. We're already hiring people all over, North America, and plan to continue to do so post-COVID. And I think we will be a lot more of a hybrid organization. What do you think work's going to be like for, companies that were traditionally all in office in a single city? And how much do you think that change is going to happen, and how quickly will it come post-COVID?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's, so first of all, I just want to say no one here knows for sure. So we're all kind of using the best data that we have to make these kinds of decisions and these kinds of statements. Now, you've noticed that your company and our company were very similar. Most of our folks were local, and they were in San Francisco, and they basically worked together. Now, we have had a lot of engineers over the time kind of distributed or in a remote office. So I think what's going to happen, and what our customers are saying and what we're seeing in the market, is that people are basically, they are going to be in kind of this hybrid workplace kind of world where they can be at home, they can be at maybe like a local remote office or like a co-working space, or they can be at the HQ. And I think the biggest problems that will come up as part of this is kind of, where are people right now? If they're in your office, the office that you're in, you should have a meeting in person in a meeting room. But if somebody's remote from home, for example, you now need to make sure you're inviting the person as opposed to like a meeting room. And I think that this kind of coordination, and especially for groups and getting groups together, this is where there's really something that's going to really define companies in terms of their ability to collaborate. Can they get the right tooling? Can they get the right mindset for everyone to kind of be like, okay, this person's in today, this person's not. This person's in a co-working space, but it's all the same and it's all okay, because the flexibility is what's really important these days. And I think we've all kind of noticed that it's a lot of, and our customers have noticed this too, where people are just more comfortable now using a lot of the technology. But is it going to be perfect? I don't think so. I think people need to kind of see the different opportunities and then leverage each one accordingly. Working remotely forever is probably not great, given that like you should benefit from, I don't know, maybe monthly, maybe quarterly meeting up and making sure everything's available and accessible. So that's it's going to be flexible. It'll be mixed, and we see this reiterated from our customers time and time again.
All right, we're gonna come back to that. Let's go backwards a little bit. Without trying to embarrass you here, I think you're one of these, you kind of got branded as this amazing, like whiz kid engineer really early on. Google, I think, sought you out when you were still in high school and they couldn't even hire you as a full-time employee. But I kind of want to talk about how you even got up into that point, because, your early days are pretty amazing. I think you escaped your country of origin, Romania, under pretty difficult circumstances. If you don't mind, I'd love to hear that story and, what your like early childhood was like and what first got you into software engineering at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Romania, and there's this whole, I guess just historically, there's this whole kind of communist government. We had the whole Ceausescu thing going on, and they, if you would leave somebody behind. So basically what happened is that my parents essentially said, hey, we're leaving him with his grandparents for now. But really what happened is that I was smuggled underneath the back seat of a car And then we went across the border. They were totally cool with it. And then they went because they didn't know. And then we went to Germany, where we spent a few years of our lives there. My parents were working very like basic jobs. Like these are educated like people that have been in university and had masters and all that stuff. And like my mom was cleaning houses, my dad was like picking berries. And it just kind of showed in like kind of I was brought up in this environment that working hard is really a key part of any kind of success story. It's something that's really you're always gonna need to do better and better, and you got to get started somewhere. And even if it's like under the table kind of thing, you have to just have the persistence and the perseverance there. So eventually, they were able to gather enough money, and were able to kind of get papers together just so we could go to Canada. And my dad actually got a government job with the government of Canada doing COBOL development. Apparently, that's a really big skill set these days as well. But it's this kind of like he was finally able to leverage experience that he had, and he went to Canada, and we joined him after like a couple months, and then we settled there. And that's where, whenever people ask me to make the story short, that's where I grew up. Now, when I was in Germany, I started using my brother's computer for a while, and it was a lot of fun. It was really interesting. I'd play all these games on it. But every once in a while, before launching the game, I'd be like, hey, wait a second, what is that thing? Because that looks really cool. There's this old app called QBasic, and it basically let you write almost like you're typing in English what you wanted to do, and you could just do it. So yeah, I did a whole bunch of little things with it. Now, mind you, I didn't know English, so it's like a whole thing. I have to go to the library and get a book and blindly basically just type what was in this book, and it's like, oh, hey, it is a circle with a line through it. This is great. And it just led from that more and more curiosity, really just led to kind of me just building this skill set. And honestly, just the public library and having books be available. Eventually, I finally learned what the English words actually meant. But hey, by then I was doing a little bit more. And yeah, going through school was very interesting. I spent a lot of time on the computer, a lot of time trying to create things. Just a desire to stand out and be unique. And yeah, it's led me to some, I think, reasonable places. But yeah, it was definitely not without a lot of time spent, that's for sure.
And did you start designing games early on? Was that the focus?
I think every kid that like is in computers, I think they somehow start with something related to games, because that's just what excites you when you're 8, 9 years old. But over time, like then you start getting into like, how can I do my homework faster? And then you start getting these different ideas, and you discover them once the internet came out, and it was all that. We had one of the first high-speed connections, did all sorts of stuff there. Like it really got into like reverse engineering of software. And I was part of like these different groups that did this. And I just learned how software and computers really work, which is why when Google launched it was called Google Desktop Search at the time. I wanted it to kind of help me with my with indexing files on my computer that were Word perfect, but they had only Word support, Microsoft Word. So I was like, oh no, I can't use this thing. But being the big fan of Google that I was and still am, I was like, no, I have to make it work. So I basically used the knowledge that I gained over the years to modify this thing. Little did I know that when I published it online for free, just so people could use it, there's a whole industry of lawyers and law firms in the US that all want that have to legally use WordPerfect. So this was spectacular for getting just a ton of traffic to this thing. And it got essentially to the point where Google noticed, and they're like, hey, you should just come work for us instead of like hacking up our executables. Like, we don't really like that. So I ended up going there, and I helped them build a platform that eventually built out that and more products and stuff at Google while I was there. It was quite an experience.
How old were they when they reached out to you?
It was, so at the time I was 17, and it's interesting because Google has a whole hiring process and all that. So we went through the process, and yeah, I had the calls, I had all the different screens, I had all the different pieces, and then they're like, great, when can you start? And then I was kind of like, well, what do you mean? I need to finish my high school stuff first. And then also, I don't think I can technically leave Canada, because it's like, there's like, in the US, you have to have visas and they require you to be 18. And they're like, wait, whoa. What do you mean require you to be 18? How old are you? And then they only found out then, and that was I think a shocker to them. And then we had to like find all sorts of little loopholes and stuff to make it work. But in the end, it worked out. It worked out, and I was able to keep extending my time there to what ended up being something like 4 years continuously there while I was basically doing my university studies in Ottawa, Canada.
Before we go on, I really want to get your take on STEM education, whether it's self-taught or in the schools. I finished undergrad in 2000, and at that time, it was definitely, more of a niche to study engineering. And now every major university has these really involved STEM processes. Obviously, picking up those books from a public library, changed your life, even though it wasn't even in the native language you spoke.
Yeah.
What's your take on STEM as a pathway to help people kind of change their lot in life and to be different? I mean, is there any cap on this? Like, is this just kind of right now, from your standpoint, still open, wide fields where if somebody takes the time to, learn these skill sets, they're going to have a career that's, pretty meaningful and more financially rewarding than a lot of other things that could have happened?
Yeah, so I don't know the STEM system too well, but what I do know is like it's very important that people, when they want to challenge themselves, people that want to be challenged, they have that opportunity somehow. And if they want to learn a new skill or go through a new system or that kind of thing, that sounds great to me. And I think that's what's been great about the internet. That's what's been great about like these public libraries. Like people need it. It needs to be as easy as possible for people to just get kind of the education and the learnings that they need. And you can just watch stuff online. You can watch entire courses and things on there. So yeah, it's never been easier to learn. And I just think that that's such an important, one of the most important skill sets anybody can have, especially if you plan on starting a company or operating a company in any way that's better than before. Because like the bar is pretty high these days for running a company, and it's like if you don't do really well, the people that work there will find another place. So you have to always be at your best. You have to always be very thoughtful about everything you do.
I'd love to get your take. So I've built software companies for the last 17 years, but I've done it as a non-engineer. I feel like there's lots of interesting perspective. I learned that in the mid 2000s when I was, in law school, I worked with an outsourced development firm in India to build, our first version of a product that became a venture-backed company. From your perspective, now, leading teams of folks across all different roles and obviously coming up as a software engineer yourself, what would you say are the three most important characteristics that distinguish great software engineers from good ones? Like, what do you look for in hiring, and how do you know when you have somebody that's just going to be an exceptionally important part of your engineering team?
Yeah. It's so Mike, who runs our engineering department, and I really talk about this a lot. And we think about like what are the qualities, the values that we're really looking for in people, and really it comes down to a wanting to master the craft and wanting to learn more about what they're doing. Like they're not doing it because it's a job. They're not doing it because there's like some paycheck that comes out. That's nice to have. That just comes and it happens, and we try our best to be as competitive as possible there. But it's all about, they need to want to learn the thing they're working on, and they need to want to get better, and they need to show evidence of this. Like they need to show that they're going above and beyond to figure out what the issues can be, but also that they have these projects that they work on maybe on the side or before Envoy. We're definitely looking to see, hey, do they have these pieces, and how much do they actually care about what they work on? How much pride do they have in this? So I think like the desire to learn is the number one by far. But then there's also a piece around like perseverance. Any startup will have its ups and downs, and it's very easy for somebody to just think like, oh, opportunity cost, or oh, I'm not learning anything anymore. Oh, this is a problem. All these other companies are in the press for really good things. Let's just go there. So people can jump really easily these days. I do think that like only hires makes the bar higher for companies, but it is a little bit also about like the people need to also understand that like a startup that by definition is almost a company that doesn't have its things together yet. And as you work there, as you need to become the piece that creates the thing. So this is kind of like where it's going on to the third point, which is that it's really about like wanting what we look for is people that want to create things and create things that are unique and create things that are ideally like innovative. It's very easy to just do a thing, but a lot of people like you just get bored of doing a thing, fixing a bunch of bugs or copying some other thing. Like you can't retain that excitement in someone if they're just cloning something that already exists. So innovation is just the name of the game when it comes to a company that does really well and that keeps its people and that has people that create new amazing things for the company. Yeah, and then the just collaborative ownership is extremely important as well. Making sure people understand that they are an owner. They're not just like working for the man or like whatever. They are really part of it, and they should know that when they step up and they do something risky, they need to know that if it breaks, you'll have their back. And I think that like having these pieces together, I think really creates an environment that you'll get the best people.
Love that. So you spent a number of years both at Google and at Twitter, help them with large scale problems. What did you take away from those experiences? Obviously, I think your team size today is a little bit under 200. So wildly different scale than these organizations that you came up in. What were the big learnings that you were able to take from working at Twitter, working at Google that you apply at Envoy today?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different things here. First is Google is, so when I joined Google, it was 2005. I think we were around like 9,000, 10,000 people. And they had a lot more processes and like in a good way, they had a lot more things figured out. And it's kind of nice. Like what I remembered is like, it was really nice and like, dare I say, comfortable to have so much kind of figured out and so much like, it's like, okay, cool, I do this. And like, we have this build system, we test this way, this is how you get code out. And like, that was really nice. Like just having the thoughtfulness already having been done, that was really cool. Now, what's interesting is when I joined Twitter, we weren't nearly as big. We were 40 people. So I was like employee like 40 something. And this was 2009. And we just had like downtime the entire time. And I was very excited because I could actually like help with like, hey, let's make the fail whale go away. And there was like this whole thing about a whale. But regardless, it's at Twitter, basically, we didn't have any of that. We didn't have the like systems. We didn't have even like the software. We didn't have the processes when people came in. We didn't have the optimizations around the workplace. Whereas Google had built a bunch of different software and pieces internally. They built their own visitor management stuff. They built their own meeting room stuff. They built an app where you could see where the bus was. So you can take the G bus wherever and you know exactly what time and even who's going to be on it. Like these are tools that they built themselves. And this is where it was weird because when I went to Twitter, I remember thinking like, wow, I had all these really nice things at Google. Why aren't they here? So I started asking around and it turns out that Google built all those things internally and it was very Google specific. So they didn't really publish it. And then I just kind of remembered this over the time. And as I saw Twitter grow up, I noticed that like you could see it, hey, well, for whatever reason, that person in IT is very interested in this kind of problem and they start like hacking together a solution. So, but then they wouldn't be doing the other thing that they were supposed to be doing. And it kind of got to this world of like, it seems like there's this really big neglected place in the world, and that is the workplace, where people are kind of doing things the way they used to, but it could be so much better. And then you look at the industry and you see that there's nothing really out there for any of these problems and making the workplace like a great, exciting, interesting place. And it's something that like Google built on their own, Facebook built on their own, Apple built on their own. And it's just, it only keeps on, it keeps happening. So we were like, this is silly. We should be building something that can help everyone. And we can also do a better job of it too, because there are people dedicated to it. And we can provide support 24 hours. There isn't the one person in one time zone that's maintaining it on goodwill. So it's kind of, this seemed like a great idea. And then when I eventually ended up leaving Twitter, I was like, I should really like look into this idea that like I had a while back where like, it's just multiple times over and over again. It seems like this is something that the world needs more of.
Yeah. I'm really curious to get your take and any insights and perspective on how to optimize sprint processes. And I'll share two things. One is I always wonder why more departments outside of engineering don't use a sprint process. If you think about it, all it really is defining a set of objectives, having lots of transparency, accountability, and a process to have a retrospective on how you did against it. And there's no department, whether it's sales or marketing or finance or operations, I don't think that applies to. And so sometimes I think it's odd that engineers are holding themselves to the highest bar of everybody in the company. And why can't that be replicated? We've also at Comparably always done week-long sprints. And my philosophy there is that when you're an early stage company, like we don't really have a product roadmap farther out than 3 months, because I just think that so much changes.
It changes, yeah.
Yeah. And also it doesn't mean that everything we're going to do is going to get done in 1 week. It just simply means that, in our case, we're going to chunk everything down to shorter periods of time so that we force ourselves to keep asking the question, is this the right thing to be working on? That we don't go a month working on something and don't force ourselves to revisit that discussion. And so I'm curious from your perspective, having lived it, like there's probably no better person to talk to than you about this. Like, what makes for an optimal sprint? How long are your sprint processes? And have you ever worked at an organization where there's a concept of a sprint outside of an engineering department?
That's interesting. I think, okay, so first of all, I just think with engineers in general, it's a job that if you don't do it right, you see it, and you see it very obviously, and it's glaring at you. And it's glaring at you in ways of downtime that you get paged in the middle of the night, or it's glaring at you in ways that like it just doesn't build, or it doesn't work, or it doesn't achieve the mission that you're on very clearly. It's easy to see if it works or not. I think a lot of other kind of practices, and like a lot of them are getting much more data driven and stuff these days, but a lot of other practices, it isn't as glaring. You don't know if the call you did with that customer, if you did a good job or not. You don't know if your employee onboarding, if it was really good or not. You don't know, you don't get that immediate kind of result. So I think engineers have just been kind of like, I guess, forced into a world of like humility where you have to recognize when you learn something, or when you're not good at something, or when something doesn't work. You're forced to see it. So I think that any engineer that spends plenty of time in this environment, you eventually get into this world of wanting kind of the transparency, wanting the clarity, wanting the clear, like, this is how it's going to impact things. So I think that, and I do think a lot of other practices can be this way. So the sprint process kind of acknowledges an inherent humility that, like, hey, there are things that could be stopping you, and it's okay. You just need to communicate them so others can help you. And surprise, like, the people actually do want to help you. And I think that's why the job in general has just accelerated at such a rate, because it's an environment of learning that's possible. I think a lot of kind of roles don't have that. There's a lot of kind of like experience trumps the learning, and or the experience trumps the intuition when it comes to, hey, like it's like, I've seen this before, therefore we have to do it this way, as opposed to, hey, this is a totally different system. Maybe we should consider like what makes up the system, and like first principles thinking is really important. So to actually answer the question though, I would say that sprint processes, they can be 1 week, they can be 2 weeks, they can be a little longer. I think we're similar. I think we have a 2-week sprint process right now in our engineering teams. And we've played with 1 or 2 or even like a month long. It depends. You will factor in things like how much quality do you want? How much, how responsive do you want to be? How okay are you with beta tags and tagging individual features as alpha or beta? Because with our customers, like when we built out our whole Protect suite, which is around people returning back to the workplace, we had to talk with companies. There's nothing we could copy, nothing we could look at. There's no inspiration we could get from anything. So we had to iterate quickly with customers. And I think those sprints were basically tuned down to 1 week, and talking to as many of the customers that we had. And it's like 1,000 something that we would try to talk to on like a monthly basis, and collect all the survey feedback, all the information that we needed to build the right products. But yeah, I would say the shorter, the better. But I would say that it does get a little bit like, okay, I'm still fixing that one bug from last time that comes up in the weekly ones, versus a bigger kind of more motivating progress developments that you could see in like a 2-week sprint.
Yeah. You've had a chance to work with some pretty amazing individuals up close. So Ev and Jack Dorsey, I know Biz is an investor in your company.
Yeah.
And just you have an amazing list of these angel investors. Who are the leaders that you learned the most from, and what were those lessons, and what did you take with you into Envoy?
This is a really tricky one. You're making me compare. Oh no. Okay, so there's, I mean, they're all really great. Like these people put money in something that didn't exist. I'm forever indebted, and I believe that it's kind of like it takes a lot for somebody to put in money, especially angel investment money, into someone without even having a clear product or something that's clearly obvious or that's going to like make a return. Angel investing is a money losing business. Most people end up losing money in it, and it's like, yes, it's kind of fun to have been part of that company until like that didn't work. So it's a tough thing, first of all. But yeah, I think our investors were all people that at one point in my life said, "Hey, Larry, if you ever start something, let me know." And I think that like there's some of them, like Alexis Ohanian from Initialized, and now he started a new kind of venture firm. He was like literally responsible for our first something like 20 or 30 customers. Like he basically knows everyone, and it has been extremely helpful in showing that like a really great attitude, a very strong positivity is really important. And there's a little bit of hustle in him where like he will talk to, whenever he goes in a company and there's nothing up there, he'll be like, "Hey, like, have you ever thought of Envoy? Do you know what Envoy is?" And then he'll like do the pitch literally right there. So it just shows that like just asking or saying will oftentimes really help, and especially a company. Of Razmig from one of like a previous company that I kind of worked with him on. Razmig was what his whole thing. He said this one quote to me that was really important, which is that like when you run a company, it's important that you trust people. And then it's like, yes, I know this. Everyone tells you this. I get it. And he's like, no, really. You have to trust them, and you have to tell them you trust them. And that's the piece that like that second piece is the piece that I think a lot of people miss, like especially an engineer, which is like very like systemic about things. It's like, of course, I'm doing this. Obviously, I'm promoting them. Therefore, it shows that I trust this person. It's like, no, that's not enough. Literally, just the little pieces. So it's like these kinds of small philosophical things that you can have in discussions, especially with ex CEOs and ex kind of people that have run companies. It's like, this is the kind of knowledge that's extremely, extremely important. So yeah, they absolutely stand out. But lots of other great people out there. Sunil Shah has been super helpful in just like thinking about the market. Andrew Chen from Andreessen Horowitz, very, very helpful in thinking about kind of, hey, how do we grow our visitors product? It's an inherently viral product. So making a really great, memorable experience is really key. Matt Murphy, oh my God, it's incredible how like Matt Murphy's been incredibly excellent for just thinking about B2B and SaaS and how you grow something with like actual financials involved. Like we don't need to raise nearly as much money if we have recurring revenue that we can fund ourselves with. And Matt's just been excellent in thinking very practically and rationally about things. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan. Lots more to shout out to, but it's just these are just come to mind right
now. Yeah. One more question on the topic, and then we're going to do the time machine question. What were the biggest learnings you had in building up a SaaS company? So for you and I are in the same spot. You know, my last company that Intuit bought, it was a mixture of B2C, but still mostly B2C. It was a subscription service. People would, pay $120 a year, $20 a month. It was a very large footprint of where we're in the top 250 most visited websites in the world. And then this was the first time that, I'm running a company where we're actually building out this large footprint inside sales team. What was that experience like for you as an engineer? And for someone looking to get into the SaaS space, what would be your big advice of what to think through early on the sales and revenue side, especially as a non-sales leader before this company?
Yeah. So first of all, you should assume that you as the CEO are basically the company's number one salesperson. I think that's just like assumed. And if you're not good at sales, well, if you somehow raise money, I would say that everyone's good at sales if you can raise money. So it's like, okay, let's just say you have that piece. I think what's really important is, and I was no different from any other. The advice you, or not advice, but just the general way of thinking is that, well, this product needs to. I honestly and personally believe that like products need to be very self-serviceable. You need to be able to sign up. You need to be able to get early people to use it without you needing to know them and hand holding them along the sign up process. And it needs to be self-service. There needs to be multiple plans. We had a pricing problem back in the day where like I would just want to keep it super low because I didn't want to miss anyone. And over time, like we brought it up and we brought up the price and we noticed that, hey, people are actually okay with it. And like the more you bring it up, the more they like really value it. And then they start talking about like, hey, like it also goes higher up the chain when it comes to approvals. That comes with positives, like you have access to more revenue, but it also comes with negatives. Like it's very hard, for example, in an enterprise business to sell to them. They have to not only like, once you realize that you're not trying to convince the person on the other end of the email, you're trying to convince their boss, and you'll never get to talk to their boss. You only get to talk to them. And whatever they put together and show to that person, you don't even know what's happening. That's going to be really critical for your business's success inside of there. So that's huge. And I didn't know anything about the sales process, but what I did know is that, hey, they can help you really get it over the hump if there's some sort of problem. They can help with workarounds. They can help go out there, find new people. So that's been really helpful. But the product needs to be able to, as they put it, like sell itself to start. And then once you see that you have strong adoption that way, then I think it's much, you can have confidence when scaling up to a real sales team that you're selling something that people want and aren't going to churn. And Envoy's the churn numbers are net negative. So it's just like of a quartile that'll just increase on average, even including people dropping off. So that's really nice. And honestly, this is how we wouldn't have gotten into something like 14,000 workplaces around the world in something like 70 countries if we hadn't had a really strong self-serve motion. Lots of enterprises start self-serve as well. They just like hide themselves in there because they want to try it out without a big deal, and you can really uncover that too. So you'll definitely find opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise had if there was just like a wall.
All right, let's do the time machine. So if you could take a time machine into your own 20s and you could meet that Larry and you could give him any piece of professional or personal advice, what would it be and why?
That's a tough one. I think there's a million things. There's absolutely a million things. I could just get a whole list of this stuff. But I think one of the biggest ones is around never even slightly lower the bar when you're hiring. There's always a pressure to kind of get that person in. They can help us for the meanwhile. They can help us now. When your company is small, the people you hire are what your company becomes. The processes you create are what your company will endure in the future. And because a lot of that stuff also doesn't scale like very well, but some of it will. And it's the people that you hire in the early days that will really define what kind of bar your company has. What does your company value? And what kind of people does your company hire? So I would say that I think I did reasonably in hiring some really good people along the way. I definitely think that we hired a lot of people that weren't so great and the fit was just absolutely not there. And don't get me wrong, they went on to other places and did very well. But there's been a lot of times where it's kind of like, hey, maybe like we just need to hire this person for now because we need to get this thing going and we just don't have time for like waiting. But honestly, waiting is really, really important, or just showing that like, oh, you need to do new things to hire better and better people. So yeah, never compromise on talent, because a company is its people, and it's not the other way around. It's not some sort of top-down thing where I just tell everyone what to do. I wish it were that way. Don't get me wrong, because that would make it so much easier, at least I think. But no, that's not how it goes. It's only easier. It's only better. It's only better when you have everyone contributing and giving their all. That's for sure.
With most of our guests, I can say, if I took you back into your 30s or 40s or 50s, I don't think I can do that. So I'm just going to ask if you could take a time machine 2 years ago, what advice would you give yourself and why?
Well, knowing about COVID, I would probably, so we did launch our Envoy Rooms product in February, and then COVID hit in March, which really didn't help our whole case of like modernizing the meeting room. But I think that like if we could go back 2 years in time, I would definitely focus a lot more on just like we gotten into this rut of just building kind of feature by feature. And the more holistic thinking about how everything should work and why we are the best and why we are the most innovative, it takes a back seat to kind of your biggest customers all demanding certain things, and then you need to just be really good at saying no, we need to build this thing that will actually be used and by everyone. And that's a really hard thing to do. So 2 years ago, I would say like we should have gotten started much earlier on building multi-product, and we should have and at the same time realizing that though a customer may request something and you build it for them, they may not end up using it, and they're just a very successful, happy customer as well. And that's a really weird world where you just like kind of distracted a whole bunch of engineers and product people and all that to work on a feature that, yes, maybe there's a checkbox, but they don't end up using. There should have been a story we should have been able to say to like defer that. And we got ourselves in this rut for several years on kind of just building like point things, when the more holistic thing that got our company from zero to something real was not around the fact that we had the checklist. The checklist is just like kind of there. The checklist is there for, like when we started Envoy, we were competing against some massive companies that have been around for 10, 20 years. And they built these visitor management systems that were just so antiquated, and they had every feature imaginable. But every single day we would just win new customers over, and we didn't have any of the checkboxes. What we had was a great experience. What we had was a great focus on the holistic experience, as opposed to just like, let's make sure we have the security checkbox. Let's make sure we have the compliance checkbox. So yeah, I'd say more products and more all-encompassing in terms of like a story, as opposed to just doubling down on our visitors product, which is still doing great. Don't get me wrong. Even in COVID, shockingly, there's a lot of companies that are, I don't know, they're manufacturing, their factories, their warehouses. The essential services are definitely still doing well with our visitors product, but lots of opportunity in workplaces for even non-essential services, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really important point that's maybe worth going into for another minute, which is the trap of building things that don't apply to a large enough audience, right? And you brought up the example of building something a customer is asking for that they don't even end up using.
Yep.
And there's even a level above that, which is that they do use it, but that not enough of your customers are using it. Yep. And there's this, in a SaaS company, like your product roadmap should, to a large portion, be defined by what your customers are asking for, right? And especially the folks who are at the front line of talking to those customers, they'll naturally want to advocate for what they're asking for. But it's the responsibility of the product owners, the leaders, to say, okay, but is this something that enough of our customers are going to use, that it's not just going to solve, what 2 or 3 big customers are looking for? And I also think there's this trap where a lot of times team members will say things like, well, they won't use this feature until it has X.
Yep.
And, my response will be like, okay, well, do you need engineering for that? Like, can't you solve for that manually to start? Prove that they're going to start using the feature, right? So for example, like I'll just give a very specific point. One of the parts of our product that's super popular is we have software that creates assets that lets employees become big promoters of companies, right? So you take a company like Envoy that like uses Comparably, and you have this amazing culture. And so it's about turning your 160 employees into promoters. And sometimes we'll get large, big enterprises that say things like, well, we need more control over the fonts and guidelines. It needs to be on brand. And so the team's always lobbying for the software to do more and more and more. And sometimes, I'll just have a conversation with them and say, well, look, let's manually create those assets for them, see that they're actually using them. And then when we know that they're committed, we'll do the work for everybody to use that feature. And I think one of the things that is really important in building SaaS companies is to keep this discipline of what are we going to build that's going to have the widest utility for the largest amount of our customers.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to be willing to say no to something that somebody's asking for to solve for the greater good.
Yep. Or give them a workaround as to some other feature that they can use to get the same thing accomplished. So going back to kind of what you said and what is common practice, which is that you have to build what your customers are asking for. And I agree with the concept, but it's more about you have to build what will solve the problems your customers are having. I would say is the different way of saying that, because it's like they have a problem. Like, for example, in your example, which is really funny because we have the exact same thing going on, except for emails. They want to customize the emails. Now, I know emails. I know the formatting in emails, and I know the mess, the web 1.0 kind of tables with percentage cell with stuff that you have to do. You basically, email is like you're in a time machine and you went back to the mid 90s and you're using that HTML to design an email. And it's just like, it's super incompatible. And if we let customers do that, what they'll do on average, we expect, is that they'll just make it like not work. It'll look reasonable on maybe their one browser, but when you look at all the other browsers, when you look at just the compatibility, will it work in mobile? Will it work in full screen? That doesn't work. So we're doing so kind of like, what do we do? And they want this. It's like, well, your competitor has this feature and I can just set the HTML of my emails. So getting a workaround that kind of uses our existing functionality and figuring out, like, what are you trying to accomplish? Oh, you don't want the map in the email because you're all working from home. Oh, that's the issue. It's not that they wanted to customize every single little thing. It's that they found the map in the email to be misleading because in COVID, you don't need to go somewhere. So it's that kind of thing where it's like, if you really dig into the why does somebody want this? Like, what have they been doing to get around it? Like, you discover that, like, wait a second, we can just use an existing feature and you can solve it this way. And usually you are like, you know your product inside out and backwards, so you can just recommend it. And this happens all the time. Like, the amount of things that we've kind of thought that we had to build will absolutely not be necessary when you can repurpose something else. Now, we've also kind of repurpose something else incorrectly. And then the customer's like, are you kidding me? Like, I've been asking for 2 months, you give me this. This isn't even close to what I need. This doesn't solve our problem. Like, we get it wrong too. Every company, I think, gets it wrong in some way. But I think more often than not, we're able to save ourselves a lot of time and complexity in this. And I think that that's really important if you want a code base, at least, that scales over time.
Yeah, you made me think of something in the terminology used around digging. So, like, just this concept of dig deeper. And there's kind of a hack that I've used throughout most of my career, and whether you use it in sales or management. And it's just simply asking the same question more than once.
Yep.
And I'll give you two examples, one in sales and one in hiring. So, I'm a big fan of, in sales, trying to just dig deeper and get into the heart of what somebody's going through. And a lot of times I just ask the same question over and over, worded differently. Like, what are your big goals and priorities? If we work together, what would success look like? What would make you want to come on as a customer? All I'm doing is really just asking the same open-ended question of, what outcome are you trying to get to?
And by the way, that's a really important question too. Like, it's like, don't be afraid to ask that exact question that you're saying, because you will literally find out how they're being goaled, even what their like OKRs are. Like, if you know that person's goals inside their own company, if you know what gets that person promoted, like, you can now position everything around your product in a way that helps this person, and they can better communicate it too. So yeah, it's a really important question that I think not enough people ask.
Yeah, and think about it appreciate that. And think about it in terms of both management and hiring. So, for example, one of the things, that most people get asked in an interview is, hey, what's an example of something that you need to get better at as a professional? And I often find that somebody has that first answer ready, but then when you just dig a little bit deeper and you just simply say these two words, what else? It's like frozen. And it's the candidate that can go with you and can give that non-scripted answer and be open and vulnerable and thoughtful, that tells you so much about who they are. The same things in management. When you ask your team, well, hey, how come this decision was made here? They'll often have a first response ready. But when you just ask the same question 2 or 3 more times, a lot of times you find out either maybe there was something missing in what was going on, or there was this extra rationale that they didn't give right up front that was super important. And I think one of the key tenets of digging deeper is just be willing to ask the same question 2 or 3 times in a row and see where it takes you on that journey with somebody.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Same with pauses as well. When you're answering stuff, it's like by pausing, like I think it's fine to let the candidate kind of, it's like, hey, what else? Or like expand on that. Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree. This applies in so many different industries too.
So I'm going to come back to a question on that note that I asked you earlier, because the topic to me is just so interesting. You know, looking at your business today and how you've had to navigate COVID. You know, what does the future look like for Envoy? Like, what are you going to be today? You know, and what are you going to turn into that, you know, maybe 3 years ago wasn't on your product roadmap of how you were going to help companies?
Yeah, I mean, so we feel like what we're building today is exactly what we wanted to build a long time ago. We've always wanted to basically transform how workplaces are being done and to modernize everything as much as possible. But with COVID in here, it makes it a little tough in that, like, at first it was like, oh no, what are we going to do? But right afterwards, it's kind of like, well, what we're going to do is we're going to systematize more things around the workplace. Now, it's not just about your visitors, it's about your employees. It's about screening them if they've been to a place that like they could have gotten sick in. It's about like capacity management. It's about resource sharing, being able to share your desks and your meeting rooms with people. And it's a tricky part because we've wanted to do these for a while, and now it's kind of like forced on the industry, because like there's in San Francisco or something, even, well, now it's like 0%, but it's going to go back to something like 10% or 20% of your workplace is legally allowed to be there. And you need to ensure that there's distancing between people. You need to ensure that every other desk is booked, not the ones beside each other. And there's audits and there's compliance reasons for this too. So it's kind of like, what makes this really interesting is, well, we've wanted to build a hot desking product for a while. We've wanted to build a meeting room booking and space utilization in terms of ensuring people are actually in the rooms for a while. We've wanted to do things like door access and capacity management and like maybe even cleaning schedules in an interesting, exciting way. And it's like now we can actually do that, and it's incredibly relevant because people need to clean way more than often. People show up to all sorts of different offices. People need to know, is there going to be my team in the office today, or is it just me? Because then that will change your day to day. So I think the future for the next foreseeable, I would say for at least the next year or two, it's going to be this hybrid workplace where people are kind of, they can be anywhere, but when they need to be together with people in a physical space, Envoy will be trying to help them in whatever way we can in terms of like, hey, here's how you're going to get your coffee. Here's how, here's who else is going to be there. We've just assigned you all to this pod of desks. You're all sitting in this area. And by the way, you have 2 meetings today. So they're going to be right beside that pod of desks in the 2 rooms beside them. So this is where, like, when the world in the next little while is going to be much more focused on kind of groups and flexibility. People are only going to be in for 2 days a week, 3 days a week. Why would you kind of reserve and hold up an entire desk permanently assigned to one person if they're only in there for 2 days a week? So you can have a smaller office that when they are together, they are much more engaged. It's a much more kind of community building exercise. And you can get all these advantages of a smaller workplace, even though you may be bigger. And you can save a lot of money in it too. So especially for smaller companies where every single penny matters, it's kind of it's a great way you can really kind of timeshare all these different things. Hopefully one day we can even help people kind of timeshare amongst different companies. Hey, if you got extra space and I don't know, WeWork downstairs has all these empty meeting rooms, maybe you can just book a room right from your phone, the Envoy mobile app you already use. So we see there being a lot of really cool flexibility options and resource sharing and just kind of unifying everything under this Office OS or platform.
Yeah. And I'd love to get from you, any advice that you have for everybody out there and for me of how you feel like you can best manage a newly distributed team. And I think the classic advice, which is 100% true, which is have clear goals and deliverable for everybody, manage them against it. And wherever anybody is, as long as they're meeting those goals and deliverables, doing it ethically and building good culture, you're hitting your scorecard. I think to your earlier conversation, that sometimes is super easy to measure in something like an engineering sprint, which is very black and white, whether those goals are hit. For other departments that may not be able to see the fruits of their labor for a longer period of time, I still struggle with, hey, how am I building a good company culture when everybody's working from home? I know that we have team members that are working harder than they did when they were in the office because they're just kind of always on. We have team members that are working just as hard, and we have team members that are clearly working a fraction as hard as they did when they were required to be in an office 9 hours a day. And so I'm curious to get from you, like, what are you doing to be successful in a newly distributed environment, and what are you seeing other company leaders doing as well there?
Yeah, it's so goal setting absolutely is really important. I do think that when people are separate from each other, you do lose a lot. You lose a lot of kind of social and communication aspect of it all. So I think you need to, and communication is what everybody's terrible at. That's basically like the law of the world, that everyone's terrible at communication. You need to be less terrible at communication. You need to be like reasonably okay is almost enough of a switch to like make it way better for everyone. Everyone's going through this right now. A lot of people are single. They don't have anybody else in their lives. They're just stuck in their home all day. They need some community. They need somebody to talk with. They need a communication from the company. And it's very easy, like somebody walking around an office, it's like, okay, cool, this person exists. They're happy, they're human, they're smiling. They're not a terrible person, great. When everybody's remote and you don't see somebody for a while, it's very easy for somebody to get into a mindset of like, okay, I don't know, is this person like out to get me? Is the whole world against me? Is the company out to get me? And only what's interest for the company, not me. It's like, we need to rise up. So it's like this kind of thing can very, very quickly like kind of snowball into a real issue. And I think just having constant communication with everyone at the company. We have a weekly show and tell where for an hour, at least we try to keep it at an hour, usually it goes like an hour 15 and everyone gets upset. But let's say an hour, we all get together and people show off cool projects that they've been working on throughout the week. And we try to tune the content to be focused on our core values and making sure that kind of what people are showing off kind of shows people going above and beyond, people creating a great experience for companies, people standing out, people making decisions without all the data, like that kind of, we try to really highlight the values in these things. So people kind of have a bit of it's clear what the purpose is. It's clear kind of that they are doing it in ways that others are too. And then it's just like, yeah, we like to send people shirts and stuff every once in a while, remind them that like, it's not all just business. The goals are great. Don't get me wrong for a second. And goals, by the way, are extremely hard to do. They can be way above, way below. It's a whole complicated mess, especially during COVID for a company like ours. But getting people together and especially like socially in whatever way you can, even if it's just Zoom or Zoom is not great for the social aspect, but there's certain like we use this thing called Topia, which is kind of fun, and it just helps people. Like you can walk around and you have like a little avatar, and it's kind of fun, and it's different from our day-to-day Zoom. So it's not all business. You don't need to set up a meeting to ask somebody how's your day, which is what you could have done before, but now you can't really. So yeah, it's just bring more humanity to the business. It's really, really important right now because we all kind of turn into these robots otherwise, where you are what you produce and nothing else matters. And I think that's like kind of the direction a lot of the world is going in right now. And I get it. Don't get me wrong. As a company, it's wonderful. And as like somebody leading a bunch of people, knowing that they're going to have these goals is great. It's very nice for business sustainability. But you lose a lot of the passion. You lose a lot of the things you didn't ask for that you get. You lose a lot of the like the even like it comes down to referrals. You get less referrals unless you keep the company and what we're building and the bigger mission top of mind. So yeah, the communication is really, really key. It's like the main thing that I never feel like I do enough of, and is absolutely not enough of. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, you've been amazingly thoughtful and transparent in this time. We're all kind of on this journey together, and I think it's pretty easy for most of us to look at, any number of folks, including you, and just see all this incredible success that you've had, and to be able to just share a little bit more insight into, your personal journey, how you got to where you're at today, what you've had to go through during COVID. I think just says a lot for you about you. It is not hard to see, Larry, why so many incredibly successful people were like, let me know when you're going to do your company. I want to get behind you. Like, you're going to create a lot of success for a lot of folks. And I think you're the kind of person that, we all learn a lot from and are all rooting on. Like, you just got a great nature and thoughtfulness about you. And it's clear to see why you got such a great company culture and why you have such good employee reviews. And so I'm excited to see the continually evolving Envoy business. And so many folks I know today probably learned a lot about what they could be doing on their journey as well. So thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And just the same to you on all these different points. It's wild times running a company right now, but being good-hearted, being helpful in whatever way you can. Just want to thank you big time for also having me on this. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Wishing everybody continued lots of health and success at the beginning of 2021 here. And we're going to be doing a lot more of these amazing CEO interviews. So thank you for continuing to join us. But most of all, thank you to you, Larry, for taking time out of your day-to-day. I would encourage you to go check out Envoy for your businesses. Go see the amazing culture that they've got, on all these different platforms, including Comparably, and looking forward to seeing and hearing more of what you're going to do over time. So thanks again. And looking forward to having you all join us again for these upcoming series.
Nice. Thank you.